my beautiful students. This is Aprajita and I welcome you all to my channel Tech Diaries. It has been long since I have posted some of the videos due to my busyness. I apologize for that. So today we will be discussing a chapter that is computer hardware from class 7 Icse board. Okay, so those who have any doubts, you can check out the chapter and clear your doubts as well. So let's begin with our chapter. Before that, if you like my video, please like, share and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell button so that you get the notification instantly whenever the video is published. So let's begin with our chapter. Today we will be learning about computer hardware. Okay, we all know what is computer, right? So in case if you don't know, I will just simply get it on to you. Computer is an electronic device which is capable of processing the data from the user by taking it, and then it will process it and give the required output to you. For doing so, it uses the components of this, which is the hardware and software. A computer comprises of hardware and software, and both of them are interrelated. So if you want to use the hardware, it is necessary to have a proper software to use. If you want to use the software, you will need the hardware. So they both are interrelated and both are the important aspect of computer system. So even there is an absence of a certain case, certain component, you cannot use it. So that's why both of them are important. Both hardware is also important and software is also important. So today we are going to learn about different kinds of computer hardware. So let us first come to what is computer hardware. Okay, you can define computer hardware as a collective term which is used to describe any of the physical components of either an analog computer or a digital computer. Okay, so we can write it down as computer hardware is a collective term used to describe any of the physical components of an analog or digital computer. So physical components means the components that can be touched or that can be, and even that can be seen by our eyes. Okay, so there are different kinds of physical components. Whenever you see a computer system, you will see that it is comprised of different devices from the exterior view or structure. So that is called physical component, which indicates that we can see the devices and we can also touch it. That is physical component, and the computer can be analog or digital, both. Okay, now there are some hardwares which are inside the computer and some of the hardwares can be seen from outside the computer. So in this way we can categorize the computer in two parts, computer hardware into two parts: internal hardware and external hardware. Okay, so hardware can be categorized into two parts: internal hardware and external hardware. Generally, the internal components are those that are necessary for the proper functioning of the computer. While when we are talking about the external hardware, these components are attached to the computer to add or enhance the functionality of the computer. Okay, let's deal it in detail. First of all, we will discuss about the internal hardware. It can be defined as these components collectively process or store the instructions that are delivered by the computer program or operating system. OS represents to operating system. Or simply you can tell that the internal hardware are the hardware components that are operating inside the computer system, which cannot be seen from the exterior view. When you see at the computer system, you cannot see these hardware from outside, but they are inside the computer and helping in the proper functioning of the computer. Now, there are different kinds of hardware that are working continuously inside the computer system to carry out all the instructions and the commands that are either given by the computer program used by the user or the operating system itself. Let us have a look at a list of different internal hardware. Motherboard, CPU, which is also known as Central Processing Unit, RAM, random access memory, hard drive, SSD, which is extended as solid state drive, optical drive, heat sink, graphics processing unit, and not the least NIC, which is also called network interface card. So these are the list of different internal hardwares. Let me just read it out once more for you. Motherboard, CPU or the central processing unit, RAM, random access memory, hard drive, SSD, solid state drive, optical drives, heat sink, graphics processing unit, and NIC, which is the network interface card. Let us now deal one by one in detail about all of these internal hardware. Let us first discuss about what is the motherboard. You can say that motherboard is the central hub where all the other components that are working inside the computer system are attached to or they run through the motherboard. Okay, so what is it? It is a printed circuit type plate. When you see inside the CPU, there you can see that there is a plate like structure and it holds different circuits and slots, or you can say chips that are used inside the CPU, and that certain circuit board is called the motherboard. Why it is called motherboard? Because that holds all the CPU and other internal essential components which are used to operate the computer system. That is why it is called the motherboard. Let us define first. This is a printed circuit board that holds the CPU and other essential internal hardware and functions as the central hub that all other hardware components run through. Okay, it is the central hub that all the other hardware components run through. Now, why it is a central hub? Because the memory chips, RAM and ROM and the microprocessor, everything is just on the motherboard. It holds all the components and just make them work through. So that is why it is one of the most important internal hardware too. Let's move on to CPU, which is the central processing unit. Central processing unit. Everybody knows that CPU is the brain of the computer, and absence of it doesn't make any sense that the computer will work. Okay, with the help of CPU, the computer can process and execute any kind of digital instructions that are given from various programs by the user. Okay, so we can write it down as the CPU is the brain of computer, that processes and executes digital instructions from various programs. It also determines the functioning of computer. Okay, whenever we are giving a certain task, the CPU determines what would be the computer's performance and how much efficiency will be given in processing the data. So how does it determine that? It determines it with the clock speed. There is a clock inside the CPU which is continuously running even if the CPU is shut down. The clock speed determines the computer's performance and efficiency in processing the data. So as I told you, there is a clock inside the CPU which is continuously running, and with the help of this clock speed, all the works or instructions or tasks in the computer system are carried out. So the time management is also done by this clock speed by the operating system, which helps the computer to efficiently manage and complete all the tasks that are given by the user. Let's move on to RAM. RAM refers to random access memory. If you don't know what is RAM, let me just recall you. Random access memory or RAM is a part of computer's primary memory, and it is the temporary memory also. Why is it known as temporary memory? Because as soon as the electricity is switched off, the instructions or data inside the RAM is automatically cleared out or erased. It is not permanently saved. Okay, so whenever we are working inside the computer, the data is temporarily saved in RAM, and whenever as soon as we work out or the electricity shuts down, the data is erased from the RAM. That is why it is called the temporary memory too. RAM or dynamic RAM is temporary memory. that makes information immediately accessible. Immediately accessible to programs. Now, how does this work? Whenever we are working with some of the software or programs, what we do, the data is collected in the RAM, and whenever we are using that data in the particular software or program, that data is not again and again collected from the permanent storage, but it is stored for the time being in the RAM so that it can be used and really available whenever we need it. After that, that is erased automatically. So this helps us to work very efficiently. RAM is a volatile memory. So the stored data is cleared when the computer powers off. As I told you that the data that is stored in RAM is not permanent, because as soon as the electricity is off, it is automatically erased. So this memory is also called the volatile memory. Let's move on to another internal hardware, that is the hard disk. Hard disk. Hard disk drive is one of the storage components of the computer, and it is not the temporary storage, it is the permanent storage component. They are already present inside the CPU, so they are known as the permanent storage. Hard disk drives are physical storage system. Why? Because we can see that it is present inside the CPU. Physical storage devices that store both permanent and temporary data in different formats, including programs, operating systems, device files, photos, etc. There are different kinds of things that can be stored in the hard disk drive. So they store both permanent and temporary data in different formats. Once the data is stored on hard disk, it won't be deleted until and unless due to the external factors. Either you delete it, only then it will be deleted. Otherwise, if the hard disk crashes, only then it can get deleted, or it can also get deleted with the help of some kind of virus or malware. So other than that, it doesn't get deleted by itself, including programs, operating systems, device files, photos, videos, music, audio file, etc. There are different kinds of file formats in which we work. The operating system that is installed inside the computer is also installed in the hard drive. Okay, every other software that is installed in the computer, that is the device files, programs, that are also stored in the hard drive. So it is the permanent and temporary both storage system. The next internal hardware is the solid state drive. Solid state drive. Now what are they? They are solid state storage devices based on NAND flash memory technology. They are non-volatile. Non-volatile means that even if the electricity goes off suddenly or it is turned off, the data inside the SSD will still remain there. It won't get erased. So they can safely store data even when the computer is powered down. So these are the solid state drive. Next comes the optical drive. What are optical drives? They are typically residing in an on-device drive. Okay, they enable the computer to read and interact with non-magnetic external media. Now, what are these? Let us first write down in detail. Optical drives typically reside in an on-device drive bay. They enable the computer to read and interact the non-magnetic external media such as CD-ROM or digital video disc. Okay, let me simplify it for you. Optical drives are the drives that are used to read the CD and DVD. Okay, whenever you are playing a CD or DVD through a computer or CPU, the drive that are used to read those CDs and DVDs are called optical drives. As they are the non-magnetic devices, they are read by the optical drive itself. So for reading or writing the CD or DVD, you must have an optical drive into your computer system. Otherwise, you cannot use it. Our next internal component is the heat sink. Now, what is a heat sink? Let me first explain it to you. Inside the CPU, there are various components that are working continuously. You can also hear the sound of the components working, and there is also the sound of a fan which is moving inside the computer. While these components are working vigorously, they tend to produce heat inside the computer. So this needs to be eradicated or reduced to maximize the performance of the computer system. Otherwise, this heat will tremendously decrease the performance of the system. So there is a passive piece of hardware which draws back or reduces the heat away from the components. It is constantly working as soon as the CPU starts operating. That helps to regulate or reduce the temperature of the CPU and the components inside, and it also helps to ensure that they continue to function properly. So a heat sink is installed to reduce the heat away from the internal components working inside the CPU. So let's explain it down. Heat sink is a passive piece of hardware that draws heat away from the components to regulate or reduce their temperature. It helps to ensure that they continue to function properly. So typically when they are installing the heatsink, it is installed on the top of the CPU or the microprocessor, because that is the place where the most of the heat is generated. So typically a heatsink is installed directly on top of the CPU, which produces the most heat among the internal hardware components. Okay, so that is called heat sink. Now let us have a look at the graphics processing unit. The graphics processing unit is a device that helps to process the graphical data, and it also functions as an extension to the main CPU. So whenever you are going to play the video or a game or a graphical software, you need to have this graphical processing unit so that this functions smoothly and you will not have any visual problems while working. So this chip-based device processes graphical data and often functions as an extension to the main CPU. You might have heard that whenever you are using a game that has a high definition or resolution, you will need to install a relevant graphics chip. So that helps the computer to regulate with the graphics requirement of the certain program or software. So in this case we will require the graphics processing chip or unit. Last but not the least is the network interface card, which is a really important component of the computer. Network interface card, which is known as NIC. Now what is this? It is a chip or a circuit board that helps the computer to establish the computer network. Okay, so it is also called the network adapter, or you must have heard the name LAN adapter, local network adapter. These are all different names for the NIC. So what it does, it helps to establish a connection, internet connection or network connection to the computer. NIC is a circuit board. Generally, it is present at the back of the computer. CPU chip that enables the computer to connect to a network. So it supports the connection to an Ethernet network. So for using an internet connection, you need to have a NIC card installed into your computer system. Previously, it was not given defaultly, but nowadays, since it is everything is digitalized and most of the people use online services, this has already been installed into your computer or a laptop. So you can see whether it has been installed or not, or if you want to use the internet connection, you get it installed. So these are all the internal components of the computer system. I hope you have understood everything. If you have any doubts, you can write me down in the comment section. I will try to clarify it. So this much for today. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Bye.